again by Benning. Darnell Nurse left it in the corner, gets up center. Perry scores! Corey Perry!
Ilya able to shake away from Solani. It's given away to Solani. Around in front. Score! Teemu Solani with the steal.
And the fans want one. Score! Off the floor! On the board! Paul Kariya!
So, elite number one seed Derek Grant, Eddie, took over the game last night and almost single-handedly, John Gibson had a lot to do with it, defeated the Stanley Cup champions last night.
Yeah, not
what the hell is going on?
Not first career hat trick for Derek Grant, which I guess is no surprise. But it's never a bad thing, right? It's never a bad thing when a guy you don't expect scores a hat trick. But it would be nice to see some of the guys we're used to in Silfverberg or Raquel doing the same thing.
Were you blown away by that game last night? I was watching it with Jimmy and a bunch of people at his wife's birthday party, and I was like, what is going on here? I mean, we had and we'll get to the game before. By the way, welcome everybody to the Forever Mighty podcast. We'll get to the game before because I was at that game and it was pretty bad. The Ducks lost the Sharks, but I want to talk about good news first, which is Derek Grant, who hasn't really been very good at. Like, his underlying numbers are pretty crappy. And he gets a couple chances here and there, but last night putting up a 3-spot, dude. And now he gets to name his buddy's kid.
Well, yeah, if anybody deserved to be healthy scratch for that game, out of the Ducks' current forwards, you would think Derek Grant probably should have been at the top of that list. But I guess good thing it was Ondrej Kase who ended up being scratched instead of Derek Grant in that game. He looked good. I mean, this was obviously his best game of the season. It's been a tough go. And, I mean, again, Derek Grant isn't, the typical guy you'd look for when you're looking at consistency when it comes to putting up points. Him and Carter Rowney, and then usually whoever the third guy is they put on that line, they kind of have their role. And a lot of times it comes down to penalty kill and just being a disruptive force on the fourth line. But whenever he can contribute like this, it's always great. And I mean, don't expect it too often. Like you said, this is the first hat trick of his career, and I expect it might be the only one he ever gets. But
wow, bold prediction.
Yeah, I don't think it's too much of a hot take, but I mean, hey, sometimes you need it, right? The Ducks are not going to be one of the top goal-scoring teams in the league, so whenever you can get an individual effort like that from a player you don't expect it from, it helps you go out and beat the defending Stanley Cup champions. And of course, we can't forget John Gibson and the way he played in that game, 37 saves, only one goal against. He was a big factor in why the Ducks held on in that game, but Derek Grant grabbing the shorthanded goal and the even strength goal and then the empty netter, that goes a long way to helping the Ducks win that game.
I mean, that shorthanded goal was a beauty, though.
Yeah,
that was a beauty. That was a great play. Good intercept by him. And then to walk in alone on Binnington like that and put that little move on him. And Binnington's had veteran move indeed. I mean, Binnington, though, hasn't been bad. He was sitting, prior to that game, around a 925, I think 928 save percentage. He's had a pretty good run this season. It's not like he's, backup quality goaltender after winning the Cup like a lot of us suspected. He's been having a good go. But he gets beat by, fourth line grinder. That's pretty much what happened here.
Yeah,
the whole game.
Yeah, and obviously the first goal ended up being a nice passing play between Getzlaf and Max Jones, which was nice to see Jones get a chance to be on a top six role, because I don't think there's been either many or any games where Max Jones has played outside of the kid line with Steele and Terry, which was technically the Ducks' third line, or the fourth line with Grant and Rowney, and now he gets a chance with Getzlaf, and they convert, I think, within the first 4 minutes of the game off kind of an unselfish play by Max Jones to pass it back over to Getzlaf, which I guess kind of goes against what they've been telling him to do, is kind of make things more simple and just shoot the puck more, and he ends up making the pass, which turns out to be a good thing for the Ducks. But, that combined with John Gibson's game and the play from Derek Grant in that one, it was a nice kind of, like you said, a happy moment for the Ducks after losing 5 in a row. And it just felt like you looked at this game and then the one we'll talk about later coming up against Washington, the two best teams in the league right now, best team in the East, best team in the West. It didn't look like it was going to get any better, and this is a good step to making things a little bit better.
Yeah, no, I mean, Max Jones has played well since he's had time with Ryan Getzlaf, which is, like you were saying, great to see. He played alongside Getzlaf and Ricard Raquel on that line, so not bad teammates to have when you're trying to get your scoring touch underway. Question for you: who do you think played the top forward line minutes of 5-on-5?
Oh man, I would think it would be Silverberger and one of him or Henrique. I would think.
Nick Delorier, Derek Grant, and Carter Rowney had the most 5-on-5 ice time last night.
Against the Blues? Jeez.
Against the Blues. 10 minutes and 1 second.
I was surprised Nick Delorier didn't fight. He had back-to-back games.
He tried. He tried to kill Oscar Sundqvist, but Cam Fowler came over and bear hugged him, and was, for whatever reason, looked like he was trying to protect Oscar Sundqvist from being murdered by Nick Delorier. If you want to hop into this, after Gibby just got absolutely rolled, I was on Twitter going back and forth with a few people about this. Oscar Sundqvist, in my opinion, Ed, made no effort to stop, no effort to go around Gibson. Sure, he tried to tuck his shoulders so he didn't clip his head or whatever. Still clipped his head. John Gibson is well out behind the crease or behind the net, handling the puck before Sundqvist even gets there. So in my opinion, that right there means that not only is that a penalty, but I would have gone as far if he would have got a 5 or done something for running the goalie like that, and they would have gave him the rest of the game off. No suspension, I understand, no injury, but a 2-minute penalty to me just didn't suffice, and then a fine of $7,000. Like, what does he give a shit about a $7,000 fine? Like, I think there should have been more Oscar Sundqvist there.
I think there should have been more in that game. I don't know about a suspension because he does try and get out of the way, in the sense that he tries to bounce himself off the boards. There's nowhere really for him to go. You could argue that he probably shouldn't even got himself in that position and gone behind the net to try at that speed to try and get the puck from Gibson. And Gibby maybe puts himself in a tough position there in a player who can't really stop. But yeah, I think it was a dangerous play by Sundqvist, and he probably should have gotten a 5 in a game, and that be it. I don't think it's suspension worthy. So they have to come out and do something because they only gave him the minor, right? So they had to come out and do something. The hearing, I think, is warranted. And then I think based off of the play itself, I think the fine is warranted. I just think there should have been more in the game. I think if he was given a 5 and 10, we probably wouldn't have seen the fine today. We might not even have seen a hearing because I think that would have been it. He would have been technically out of that game, which sometimes when you look at suspensions, they use that and they kind of count that as already a 1-game suspension. So sometimes they don't hand out further suspensions afterwards. So I think in game, based off that play, based off the way things are going, he probably should have gotten 5 and a 10. It's not the way they ended up going.
I think if they would have gave him a 5 and a 10, I honestly, like you said, we're not talking about it, 1. And 2, a 5 and a 10 to me, and that play happened. Was it in the second period where that happened, or the third period?
I think it was in the second.
I'll have to go back and check, but I know that if that would have happened in the second period, 5 and a 10, he's gone. Then no one's calling for anything. It's over with. It's fine. He got what he deserved. But thankfully, Gibby wasn't injured, man. I mean, there's a big possibility there. You take a headshot. I mean, and some of the defenders of Sundqvist come out and say, "Oh, he even went to put his arm on him to see." It's like, dude, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and that's from behind too. You're unsuspecting, and in John Gibson's case, so that could be a lot worse than it actually was.
I mean, I was trying to say to somebody on Twitter, like, I don't care if he was expecting or unexpecting or doing whatever. He drove through with his stick leaning forward. No one Gibson was behind the net playing the puck. You can't make contact with the goalie, 1, ever. 2, you can't make head contact with anybody, and he did both. So, and I'm not screaming for game on game, suspend him for like nothing of the sort. But just you got to call it. And I felt like the referees kind of let off a little easy there, to be honest.
I kind of sympathize with him a bit. It's a tough one to call in that game. You can't give a double minor because that's just not precedent for a play like that. So you really only got 2 choices. You've got a 2 or a 5 and a 10, right? Like you've only got that one choice, and one's in the low end of the spectrum in terms of a minor penalty. The other one's on the high end of the spectrum in a 5 and a 10. And I felt like it probably could have fell in that middle ground. I think it was a little bit closer to being a 5 and a 10, but it wasn't. I don't think it was obvious that it would be every time that ever happens that you would call that a 5 and a 10. So it's a tough call, I think, to make in the time there and decide whether it should just be a minor, and then you wait and see after the game with the hearing and what else if there's going to be more supplemental discipline, Or if you're the refs, you give the 5 and 10, and that completely influences after what happens after the game in terms of further suspensions or fines. So I think it's a tough call to make. I still probably would have leaned towards giving him a 5 and a 10, and then just stopping things there and not having because that risk you run the risk as well as a guy like Nick Deslauriers going out and headshotting or headhunting Sundqvist or other Blues players after that. You never know what that's going to happen, because it's clear that the players didn't think that a 2 was sufficient enough for what what could have happened to John Gibson.
When was moving on here? We don't need to beat a dead horse any further than that. I could rant forever about how it should have been more. And you know me, dude. I don't defend goalies over anything. But Ondrej Kase. I mean, how many games has he come back since his quote unquote jaw injury?
Oh man, I think he's played at least 3 or 4, right?
3 or 4, and then he was a healthy scratch last night. I gotta ask, man. Do you feel like there's something going on with him this season? He's got 1 goal on the year. I don't know. He doesn't seem like he's been getting the same quality chances as we would come to expect from a guy who's a noted top 5 play driver in the league. And he just hasn't done what we expected him to do. He gets scratched in last night's game, and I mean, it didn't hurt the Ducks at all, which is kind of strange going against the St. Louis Blues.
Yeah, I mean, I think he had a bad game against San Jose. He was -2 and didn't look too great. But nobody really looked great in that game against San Jose, especially in that third period. And before that, he had 2 assists against Detroit. And I'm just looking now, it has been 4 games since he came back. It was pointless against Edmonton and pointless against Minnesota. But the points haven't really been coming up for him. He's got 7 in 15 games, which is not great, especially if you're expecting him to be, at least by around 10 or 11 mark right now, and you'd hope with 4 or 5 goals. So I guess in that sense, he's been down, but he's not been the worst Ducks player by any means.
No, not at all.
Yeah, and he still is one of the best play drivers. So it is an interesting decision by Dallas Eakins to healthy scratch a player like that when you're on a 5-game losing streak, and you're going into a tough game against the defending Stanley Cup champions, and you decide to bring Devin Shore back in, to keep Nick Deslauriers in the lineup, to keep Derek Grant or Carter Rowney in the lineup. It's a weird one. I didn't really understand it. I don't know why. I hope he's back for next game, because despite him struggling, he's still one of the best play drivers the Ducks have. He's still one of the their most dangerous offensive threats. So unless it's maybe like you said, something more sinister on the side that he's dealing with an injury and they just don't want to put it out there that he is still dealing with an injury, a lingering injury of some sort, or it's just the fact that they're just trying to give him a wake-up call and say, hey, we need you to put the puck in the back of the net more. We need you to be playing with some more urgency, and maybe it's that.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a number of things, but I mean, it's a bad stretch for him, right? He's played 15 games this season, so he has missed some time. He's still on the positive side of most of the underlying numbers that you're going to worry about. So I'm not writing him off by any means. It's just the Ducks need more scoring from a number of players, and I mean, you can't rely on Derek Grant, as you said at the beginning of the show, probably his one and only hat trick. You're not going to see that kind of production out of him again this season, you would imagine. So you need guys like Ondrej Kase to step up. You need Rickard Rakell did get a goal the other night against San Jose, so he was able to get one back at the goal column.
Did Silver score against San Jose as well? Or before that?
I think so. I'll have to go back and check. Yeah. But the team just needs more scoring, and that's something that we felt last season too. We gave Randy Carlyle a lot of crap about systems and how things are going to be different this year with Dallas Eakins, and they have been. The team's looked a lot different. The style of play is a lot better. The flow's a lot better, but the scoring just still isn't there. I'm not really sure what to say about it at this point.
No, yeah, and we knew that was going to be a struggle for the Ducks this year, is goal scoring and having guys who consistently put the puck in the back of the net. Unfortunately, I think Ondrej Kase was a guy we were expecting to maybe have a bigger season this year, and we got a question in the chat here from Akumara, who said, what has Kase's shooting numbers been like this year? And it could be a sense of luck for him. I mean, he's got 36 shots in 15 games, so about 2 shots per game, a little bit more than that, but his shooting percentage is 2.8%.
Yeah,
now,
well below.
Yeah, so in contrast, last year was 11.7, and the year before that was 13.7, and league average, I believe, falls around 9, 10, 11%. So it should go up. Things should realistically get better for Ondrej Kase. There is a chance maybe he has a down year. You look at his first year, and it's tough to gauge a guy for rookie season, but his shooting percentage in his first year was 6.5%. So, maybe he has a down year, like where he finishes at 6.57% at the end of the year, and it's just a down year from him. But I would fully expect the way he plays and his work ethic and his play driving ability that he gets back and that number starts rising up near the end of the season. And maybe it is, like you said, he's dealing with a lingering injury. Who knows? And that could be hampering his play a little bit. I just think he needs to find some consistency on a line that complements his abilities, and I think eventually, the goals will start to come for him.
Yeah, you would have to think so. I mean, his career shooting percentage is about 10.5%. So, he's shooting well below that. There is definitely tons of room for improvement here. So hopefully he's able to turn that around. Just kind of weird how they chose him to scratch. Nick Delorier plays in a game where there really isn't anyone to fight on the St. Louis Blues and gets some of the most ice time out of anybody 5-on-5. It's just comical the way these things have worked out.
Just when you think the Ducks are progressing, right? Nick Delorier is being rewarded for back-to-back games with the fight, and I can't hate on him too much because it's not like he's been bad. He hasn't done anything negative. He just hasn't done too much positive other than fighting a couple guys. I think Dalton Prout against the Sharks, and then he fought. Was it Hronik or somebody in I think it was Hronik. Or it was Giovanni Smith, right? Against Detroit. So, I mean, it still is kind of interesting that Delorier has got in more games than Devon Shore this year, and how, again, he still holds his place, and Ondrej Kase gets healthy scratch, and we've seen him hold a place before, and Maxime Comtois has been scratched, and Max Jones has been scratched, so I don't know what it is. I mean, I guess Dallas Eakins does like having that type of guy in the lineup. We know some coaches historically do like having a player like that in the lineup. If he's not hurting the team, fine. But when it comes to a player like Ondrej Kase having to make way as a healthy scratch for Nick Delorier, I think that's where you start crossing the line. You can make the argument with Devon Shore, but I don't think you can make that same argument with Ondrej Kase.
Yeah, I mean, Rickard Rakell, 3 goals in his last 5. Jakob Silfverberg, 2 goals in his last 5, but 5 points and 5-5. These guys are still scoring. Let's talk about the defense. So you noticed something, I mean, that we've kind of talked about here and there, but you went and dug up some stats on Chris Weidman and why the hell he's not been called up from San Diego with all the injuries we've had on defense this season. And it's just kind of curious how he hasn't been given a shot, right? I mean, the guy has played in the NHL before, so why not give him a chance?
Yeah, and I know the depth in San Diego isn't great, just like it is in Anaheim right now. Their defense depth is lacking, but when you see the Ducks go out and get a guy like Eric Goodbranson, who doesn't do too much other than be a stay-at-home defenseman, and then he has his own struggles to begin with, and plus has a $4 million contract that extends into next season. And then you see Simon Benoit get called up and doesn't play, and he's not an offensive defenseman by any means, but he's still having a pretty decent season with San Diego. Josh Mahura gets called up, and he's not struggling, but again, he's not having a great season by any means in San Diego. And then you got a guy like Chris Weidman, who has 14 points in 13 games for San Diego right now. He's a right-shot defenseman, like you said, has played in the NHL with Florida and with Ottawa. He would be an ideal candidate at this point in time to call up, like you would think, would he not? Because the Ducks are severely lacking a right-handed depth right now with Holzer and Goodbranson and now Manson obviously still being injured. Those are the 3 guys. If Manson comes back, it's Manson, Goodbranson, and Holzer. It's not great. At this point, I would give Weidman the shot. I think the only problem with that, and one of the reasons he hasn't been called up, is because of how valuable he's been to San Diego. He has 14 points in 13 games. He's been a huge piece for their offense right now, and not all of that is assists, too. He has 6 goals and 8 assists down with San Diego, so he's contributing on both sides of the offense, on being a distributor and a goal scorer. So it's tough to call a guy like that up and leave them shorthanded, but at some point, the NHL club has to come first, and if you're Bob Murray, you got to look at the fact that, Holzer is struggling, Goodbranson isn't that great, the Ducks are struggling to get offense from their blue line. Give this guy a shot. He's getting it done in the AHL. He's tied for the point lead with the goals with Sam Carrick. I think at some point he gets called up. I'm surprised he hasn't already, but you would think, with the Ducks kind of grasping for straws on their blue line right now, he'd be an easy call-up.
Yeah, I mean he's played regular season games with Ottawa, with Edmonton, and he's played one. He played one game with Florida, so he's got plenty of NHL experience. I wonder if it's something to do with the fact that he's 29 years old, and that they've been talking a lot about making this team younger, quicker, giving the kids a shot, and maybe
but how
that's
old
why
is
they
Eric
haven't rotated
Gudbranson?
him in. Well, Eric Branson's he was a
I think
first
he's
round
around
pick,
the same
dude.
age. Yeah, I can kind of I agree with that in the sense that makes sense for why they call it Mahura. But why would you call up Simon Benoit instead of Chris Weidman? And Chris Weidman's a right shot, Benoit's a left shot. It makes more sense with who the Ducks have in the lineup right now to call up the right shot. And Weidman's been the better player down there for San Diego, at least offensively. So again, I think the only reason he hasn't been called up is because of how valuable he is to this Gulls team. But at some point, the NHL club has to come first. And when you look at who the Ducks are rolling over the boards with Manson's injury, with Goodbranson and Holzer, and then having to roll 4 left shots,
Yeah.
and it's Larson's not playing that great. They're having to split up Fowler and Gooley because Lindholm's been out to play all across the lineup. At some point, this guy has to get a shot with the Ducks. He hasn't played an NHL game with the Ducks. He's been in San Diego to start the season. And again, he's not a Yanni Hakanpää. He's not a guy who's come out of Europe and played there for the last 5, 6, 7 years since his first in the NHL. He's a guy who last year played NHL games. The year before that played NHL games and didn't look too bad with Ottawa and didn't look too bad with Florida as well. So it's not like he is a no-name guy. So I can't see him having that much success for too much longer without getting a call up, especially when Josh Manson's injured.
Yeah, and we haven't really heard any timetable for either Manson or Hampus Lindholm. So the Ducks playing without their top pairing defenseman, and it hasn't really looked pretty. We got to unfortunately talk about that 5-3 loss to the Sharks, Ed, and that was some tough hockey. Ducks were
in the third period.
Yeah, but they were outpaced for a lot of the first period. Second period, they kind of middled out a bit. But they took basically a tie game to the third period and just gifted it to the Sharks. I mean, the Sharks had a power play goal. I think they also had a shorthanded goal.
Kucher and Vander Kane scored, and Kucher, it was a 2-on-1, and that's something you don't want to give up. I think that ended up making it 4-2, I think, at that point.
Yeah, yep. So, and then that Tour goal at the end, he just got a gift. He had a breakaway with so much time, and then Gibby did the half poke check. And it didn't work out great for him. He intercepted the puck at the top of his own zone and just had basically a full sheet of ice.
That Kane shorthanded goal is the dagger for me. You're still within a goal and you're on a power play. You have a chance to tie the game and you give up a shorthanded goal, and I think that's deflating at that point when you've been kind of battling in a tough game for the 40 minutes. Then they're up 3-2 and you're getting late in the third period here, and as bad as the Ducks power play has been, you have that chance to come back in this game and at least take it to overtime and get a point or scrape out a win. And then you give up that insurance goal to the Sharks on a shorthanded chance, and especially give up a breakaway when you're on the power play too. Like that's kind of tough to swallow.
Yeah, and that was not a good look for Ondrej Kase on that play. I don't know if you saw, but he was the guy trying to skate back, and I don't know if he was out of gas. I don't remember how long he's been on the ice at that point, but I remember seeing him just completely have no wheels to try to get back and try to skate with Couture. He was just dogging it. Yeah. Absolutely dogging it going back. He just had nothing left.
Maybe that contributes to why he was scratched in the next game. You never know. I think one play doesn't always lead to a guy getting scratched, but I'm sure that with the rest of his game, we already mentioned it wasn't a great game from Ondrej Kase, and maybe that's enough for Dallas Eakins to leave him out of the game. I would think that a couple other mistakes he had in that game, all those together summed up in a benching for Dallas Eakins for the game against St. Louis. I mean, hopefully he's back against the Caps because the Ducks need him, and maybe that's a nice motivational boost he needs to get things going. And he has a breakout game against the Caps because we really haven't seen a breakout game from Ondrej Kase yet.
No, what did you think about the Thomas Hertl goal that I think a lot of Ducks fans thought should have been challenged? I talked with Jimmy yesterday about it. Why not challenge it? I saw guys on Twitter, same thing, and I was at the arena and I saw it, and I was like, how I thought they were going to challenge it because there was a
It
long
looked
pause.
like it. Yeah, they looked at it for a while. Dallas Aikens and assistant coach, I think Mark Morrison, they were looking at the iPad for a little bit. And initially, I thought he motioned to challenge, and then called the ref back over and shook his head and said, "No, we're not challenging that."
I don't understand why you don't challenge there. You know what I mean? I just don't understand. I mean,
Yeah.
it was a 2-on-1 fast break the other way, and pass comes across. Hurdle gets it and keeps trying to stuff it in on Gibson. And if you watch the overhead replay, he's stuffing it in, and it's like in the same motion, pushing John Gibson's pad.
Well, he doesn't touch
across
the puck
the
at
goal
all.
line.
He just pushes Gibson's pad backwards, which in turn, I think if he doesn't touch it at all, I think John Gibson's momentum would have taken the puck over the line anyway. So maybe that's why they didn't challenge it. But I think when the fact that Hurdle pushed John Gibson's pad backwards, right there, that's enough for me to at least challenge it and see if they'll overturn it, because we've seen goals like that be overturned because that's been deemed as goaltender interference. I'm not sure why Dallas Aikens chose not to. Maybe he wasn't 100% sure and he didn't want to, have it count as a goal and then also have the Ducks go on the penalty kill against the Sharks. That's a tough situation to be in. You score an early goal, and then you get deflating loss of a challenge, and then you go on the penalty kill, and then the Sharks power play as they haven't been great this season, but you have a chance then to all of a sudden go from leading 1-0 to down 2-1. That's a tough call to make. I think it might have been overturned. Personally, I would have challenged it, but I can see where he's coming from a bit.
Yeah, no, I understand, but I mean, you got to take the chance. I mean, Toronto, I think, just reviewed it to see if it went over the line. Like, yeah, if it went over the line, it's a goal. Like,
Yeah.
it wasn't like a review of, are we going to challenge it? How did you feel about Gibson's game overall against the Sharks? Were you worried about it? There was some Gibson hate. And he's gotten some hate this season, too, for sure. And I don't really understand it. You can't make the guy the scapegoat. He's definitely been the guy that's been holding this team down a lot and played very well. But, I mean, how do you feel about his game? He had a great one against St. Louis. But against the Sharks, what were your feelings?
Yeah, I mean, he's had a couple games. I think the Sharks was one, and there was a game against, I think it was against the Jets, right, where that wasn't a great game from him, and you could argue against the Oilers as well. That was a tough one. But I don't want to say he's having a bad game, like a bad season because of it, because look at the defense in front of him, right? The fact that the Ducks' two top defensemen have been out for a while now, in Hampus Lindholm and Josh Manson. Brendan Gooley was out at some point this year, and you've got Larson and Holzer playing big minutes. You've got Del Zotto and Goodbranson playing more minutes than they should. That's tough, and the Ducks are better defensively this year, but by no means are they a great defensive team in front of John Gibson when it comes to the defense and the forwards. So he's not getting a ton of help either, and maybe he's not at the godlike tier he was to begin last year, and that's a tough standard to keep consistent for any length of time. But I think he's still playing pretty well. You look at the game, a rebound game against St. Louis where he plays excellent, and the Ducks played a lot better in front of him than they did against the Sharks. So there's going to be games like this all season for John Gibson until the Ducks can turn it around and become a better team in front of him. There's going to be games like that. But, and Okamara said in our chat, it was a rough game for him, but all players have them. And as good as John Gibson is, all players, and all goaltenders included, look at some of the best goaltenders in the league this year. They've all had games like this, and not many guys have had to play as many minutes and play as many tough minutes as John Gibson. A lot of teams this year are taking the approach. Boston and the Islanders are the two ones that come to mind, where they have two guys that are great goaltenders, and they're equally splitting their minutes. And unfortunately, the Ducks don't have the luxury to do that, because I don't think Ryan Miller could handle playing 10 games so far this season. So a lot of the load has gone on John Gibson to play a lot of these tough starts against the Sharks and against the Blues, and now probably likely coming up against the Capitals as well. So there's going to be games like this, but I'm not too worried about his game so far.
No, I mean, he's faced the 7th most scoring chances against per 60 in the league. So he's getting a lot of chances against, like you
and
just
his
mentioned.
Numbers are still decent. They're not great.
They're good. They're not godlike, right?
No.
Like we would expect. But he's been a very good goaltender. There's no reason to talk about his game in any sort of negative light. I want to talk to you next here about Max Jones, man. How do you feel about his? He gets benched, gets sent down. Comes back up. Sure, he's playing with Getzlaf, but you got to be happy for the kid, right? Do you think that he's going to be a mainstay there on that top line, and for the foreseeable future?
I don't know if he's going to be a mainstay on the top line. I just like that he's finally getting chances in the top 6, because it feels like the last, since the beginning of the season, where he's been playing is either on that third line recently with the kid line, or on the bottom line with Grant and Rowney. Now that, in the game against St. Louis, he gets a chance with Ryan Getzlaf and makes, ends up contributing to the first goal of the game on a good passing play with Ryan Getzlaf. And not only that, he does have 2 goals and an assist in his last 4 games as well. He scored against Edmonton, he scored against San Jose, picked up an assist against St. Louis, and was pointless in the game against Detroit. And he's not taking a ton of penalties either. Over his last 5 games, he's only got 2 penalty minutes, and that penalty came in the game against San Jose. So he's, the discipline has always been an issue, stemming back to junior for Max Jones, and that's something, even when we had him back on the show, I think, 2 seasons ago or early on in our podcast, he said, one of the things he was working on was discipline, and the Ducks coaching staff had told him, like, that's something you got to work on, and I feel like he's taking that to heart, and this year we saw in some comments from Dallas Aikens is that he's just got to keep things simple. That's the next step in his development for Max Jones, and I feel like over the last 4 games he's done a lot better at doing that. And now he's being rewarded with, playing with Ryan Getzlaf. And I think based on his play in the game against the Blues, I would expect him to be up back on that top line with Ryan Getzlaf. I would hope so, at least. I think, he did everything he could to earn his chance to play there again.
Yeah, no, 100%, man. I mean, like, he's going to get his chance until he goes until he goes cold, right? Yeah. I think that's just what's going to happen. If his scoring dips a bit, then there might be an issue. One more thing about the last couple of games. The Ducks finally broke through on the power play against the Sharks, getting the rebound chance. They were getting deflection chances. How did you feel about the power play against St. Louis? I mean, I don't think everyone was like, oh, look, we finally figured out how to score a power play goal. Now we're going to be fine. But did you feel like it kind of veered out of direction again against St. Louis? Or were you like, well, it just didn't work out. They only had 2?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. I think one thing you saw against San Jose, and the last podcast we had, we focused, it was a heavy focus on the Ducks power play because of those 2 or 3 articles that came out about it. And the Ducks have kind of feasted on being a perimeter team this year and really haven't got rewarded for it because, I think it was about 90% of their chances all came from either the right or left circle or from the center of the blue line. And if you're going to do that, the one thing you need to do is have guys in place either for a deflection or for a rebound. And the Ducks, I think, leading up until that game, they had 1 deflection chance all season and a couple rebound scoring chances all season, which is not good enough if you're going to be a perimeter team. And they have the guys in place to do that. And then we go into the game against the Sharks, and lo and behold, they start doing that. They get a couple deflection shots on a few power play chances they had. They had some rebound chances. I believe did they get a power play goal in that game?
They did. Jakob Silfverberg was able to stuff one home on what a lot of Sharks fans thought was a whistle that should have gone.
Yeah, I remember that one.
They thought Jones had it. It was still a little bit free. It could have easily been blown dead, but the Ducks got plenty of whacks at it, and Silfverberg knocked that one in between the legs of Jones to get the power play goal.
It's a rebound chance on, and again, they were sticking to perimeter shots, which is something they've done all year. But they were getting those deflection chances. They were getting guys in place to capitalize on rebounds. And I think they got away from that a little bit against St. Louis, and that's going to happen. It's still not like they just figured things out and they just figured, oh, hey, we're going to get deflection chances. It could have been a one-off game. We don't know. I don't think they turned things around all of a sudden. I hope things that have moving that direction. I honestly would love them to get away from perimeter shots and start trying to just at least feed pucks into the slot. I would rather them, attempt 5 slot passes every power play and it not to work out than to take, 5 perimeter shots. I would, as long as they were trying to make things happen from the prime scoring area on the ice, eventually good things are going to happen. Because, me and Jason talked about how the fact about 43% of all power play goals this season have come from that slot area. And the Ducks have, I think they've attempted 3 slot passes all season on the power play. It's not good enough. So I would rather them start doing that rather than taking perimeter shots. But if they're going to stick to being a perimeter power play team, at least get some guys in front of the net to cause some havoc.
I don't know how you could be a perimeter power play team in this league and be successful, and no one does it. I mean, the Ducks do it.
They did it slightly, right? They used to be a high tip team. Joe Pavelski would be that guy who Brent Burns would always kind of do a slap pass, and Pavelski would be there to tip, and Vander Kane or Kucher or Hurdle or Meyer would always be that guy there for the rebounds. But they didn't strictly do that. They also got some high quality chances from the slot as well. But that's the only team I can remember that would feast
There's
off
nothing
that high
wrong
tip.
with it, though. If you're able to get the high tip, it's when, like you were saying, you're not getting a deflection. I mean, deflections do a number of things, right? Means you're obviously changing the direction of the puck for the goaltender, but more than likely, you're creating a rebound on a deflected shot. It happens a lot where if you're deflecting that puck in the slot, it's going to probably go down low, maybe bang off another body or bang off the goaltender, and that's where you create your chances. If you're going to be a perimeter team, like you said, and you're not creating that, like, it's literally insanity. You're doing the same thing over and over again with no result. So the fact that they have the personnel to make a power play happen without bringing in a Taylor Hall or bringing in a Ristolainen, they just don't utilize like this. Is just mind-boggling to me. I don't understand that. I don't understand the point of how they're running their power play.
No, I don't, especially when I think they have the talent to make that work, where they could put guys in that high slot or in the middle part of the slot or closer to the net and try and attempt to make those passes. You know, Ryan Getzlaf is definitely a guy who can make a pass to the slot. We've seen it happen before. I think maybe one of the problems is the Ducks don't have the best setup to utilize that. Usually, if you're going to have a right shot and a guy sitting on that left wall and Ryan Getzlaf to make a pass to the slot, you need a guy who's a left-handed shot to one-time that puck in. It's not a clean pass when you have Getzlaf trying to make that pass to Rickard Rakell or Jakob Silfverberg in that middle part of the ice for a one-timer. It's not the best. You know, it's not the prettiest look to get that off, and you know, maybe Adam Henrique could be a guy you put in there, but usually he ends up, you know, centering the second power play. Sam Steele's kind of been a guy, but they like him on that right wall to be a similar passing option to Ryan Getzlaf. So then who do you have left there? You have Nick Ritchie, maybe you could put in there. You could put Max Jones in there, and then you're starting to kind of get lower down in those options on guys who could do that. So, you know, I don't think the Ducks have a great option when it comes to Getzlaf being the setup man and putting a left shot into that center circle. And maybe that's why we've seen the power play unit without Ryan Getzlaf do the best this year, with Sam Steele being able to make those passes into center ice to Rickard Rakell or Jakob Silfverberg. I think that's a better option for the Ducks to feed those two lethal goal scorers in the middle of the slot and have a guy like Sam Steele or Adam Henrique setting those guys up. Maybe that's a better option for them, and then you use Ryan Getzlaf as a shooter on that left half wall, which I don't think he'll ever do, but that would be ideal, I think, if they could set up like that.
Earlier this season, I know I don't want to keep going on the power play trend because I know you guys did it last show, but remember earlier in the season we all talked about Ryan Getzlaf playing down by the goal line and being a distributor that way, seeing the ice from down by the goaltender, and it worked, right? I think it worked one of the games, and we're like, well, we should keep doing that, and then it never did it again.
I think that would work. That would be the only way you could have it, where you'd be able to have Ryan Getzlaf efficiently feeding guys like Rickard Rakell and Jakob Silfverberg in those prime scoring areas, because a pass from behind the net is a little bit easier for those guys to get a good one-timer on, rather than it from coming from the left side and having to kind of deflect it in from that sense. I don't see too many teams do it anymore, where they run with a guy behind the net and distributing the puck from behind the net and setting everything up from behind the net. I think Ryan Getzlaf could definitely do it, but it would take a whole revamp of the Ducks' power play, and they seem to be content running with the point shots and the shots from the two circles. And let's kind of be honest here. I think it's looked better than last year. As bad as it's been, they've gotten better looks. They just have no structure, and they don't have a go-to play or go-to setup that works for them on the power play. It seems like they go out there with the idea that they're just going to pass the puck around and hope something opens up, and that's what they're going to go with, and that clearly doesn't work. And whether they change it around, I think that's a lot on the coaching staff setting up a new power play for the upcoming games and the remainder of the season. I hope it changes, because it needs to change, because if they keep going the way they are, where they're just essentially winging it on the power play, it's going to struggle all year. And I don't think the Ducks can continue having league worst or second worst power play in the league.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, getting a power play is supposed to give you the advantage. When you're not able to be dangerous at that time, it's just so frustrating as a fan. And I know we've talked at length about it. They need to figure it out. It'll be interesting to see what they do against the Washington Capitals tomorrow, if they're able to get a power play or two, if they're able to create some of those chances and get something in the slot. You would have to think people in management or in the organization read these articles that come out about the team. I mean, the Ducks are so careful about who they talk to, who they let in their inner circle with the media, who's saying what about them and who's talking about their players. You'd think that somebody reads these articles and are like, wow, maybe maybe this is pretty bad if we can't figure it out in house, and everyone else is noticing that we're going to try to fix it. And Aikens knows. He says they're well aware. He told Eric Stevens, "You've been here long enough, like you know what's going on." So, but the fact that they haven't been able to figure out how to get the puck to the slot is mind blowing to me. I wanted to get to a question from Brett in chat. He asked. He said, "Do you think that they'll go back to Richie, Rico, and Kasha if Jones sticks on the top line? I mean, that line has worked in the past."
Yeah, I honestly wouldn't hate it. I thought they wouldn't separate Raquel, Rico, and Silfverberg, but we saw that last game where Raquel was playing up with Getzlaf and Max Jones. So if that's the way they're going to go, I wouldn't mind seeing those three get put back together because hopefully that would mean good things for Ondrej Kase. And we know Nick Ritchie has worked on that line before. And Adam Henrique seems to be a guy that you can put between anybody, and he seems to at least play pretty well. And we saw that this year and last year. So I wouldn't mind that. And then you have, I guess, Jones, Raquel, and Getzlaf. And then you have Steele, Silfverberg, and would have been, Devon Shore last game, or Troy Terry, or whoever you want to put in there. And then you've got the fourth line as well. So I wouldn't hate it. I wouldn't mind seeing them put back together. I think at this point with Ondrej Kase, you need to try anything to get him going because he's so important to the Ducks offense. And, Silfverberg's been going all year. Raquel's been going all year, which is great to see. Ryan Getzlaf has been good. The kids have slowly started to turn it on in terms of Sam Steele and Max Jones. Troy Terry's still struggling, so we could work things out there and see how that goes. But I think at this point, the big thing for the Ducks would be getting Ondrej Kase going alongside Silfverberg and Getzlaf and Raquel. And if putting them with Ondrej Kase or with Adam Henrique and Nick Ritchie works, I think it's worth a shot.
Did you see the article, speaking of Troy Terry, on The Athletic from Jordan Samuels-Thomas about Troy Terry and not to worry about it?
I haven't looked at it. It's on my list to read because based off the title, I'm a little bit against it already because I think there is plenty of reasons to worry about Troy Terry not producing this year. I'm sure it dives heavily into underlying numbers and looks at his play driving and his playmaking this year, which has been, I guess, better than advertised. But I think there's plenty of reason, and maybe it's a topic we can get into for the next show, I think, when we can dive into that article a bit more. But I think there's plenty of reason to worry about Troy Terry this year, especially because he's been the guy that, out of all four of the rookies we've talked about, the guy that was supposed to be farther along his development, be a guy that was going to contribute in the top six this year. And now, with the way Comtois played, with the way Sam Steele's playing, with the way Max Jones has actually started to turn his play around, you could argue that Troy Terry's been the most disappointing of the four, which I think you would have, at the beginning of the season, expected him to be the best of the four.
I mean, the article goes pretty in-depth and actually clips out plays of how he's performed this season and how puck luck has had a lot to do with his chances, bouncing the wrong way, as Thomas says in his article. He's able to carry the puck in with confidence over the blue line. It's a number of things. And he said, navigating, your rookie NHL season, even though he's played some time before, and if you're not named Sidney Crosby or Connor McDavid, I mean, and those guys, it's like playing in a beer league for those guys. I mean, not everyone has that, that type of skill. So not to worry about Troy Terry necessarily. He's getting chances. They're not going in. But he likes that he has strong, confident play. And I think one of the biggest problems we've seen, not just with Terry, but with the youngsters in general, is not shooting the puck, right? I mean, Sam Steele, same thing, not shooting the puck, like in prime scoring area. He did it against the Sharks, right in the slot, didn't shoot the puck, passed it off to the side. Whatever reason, it's just been tough for the kids in the first 20 some odd games. But you go check out that article, Ben. I read it a bit. It's a long article, so I didn't get through the whole thing. But it kind of makes it. If you guys haven't read it, those of you listening, get the Athletic subscription. Obviously, you have to get that. Tons of coverage, which is great. But that article is great. Former player Thomas writes a nice clip about Troy Terry and breaks down some things for him. So if you guys are frustrated with him, go ahead and look at that article. A lot of good points in that. For sure.
I think before we close this topic out on Troy Terry, I think the one thing that you have to keep in mind too for most people is what are you expecting from Troy Terry this year? If you're expecting him to be close to a point per game player, I don't think especially at this point in his career, I don't think that's what he should be, or even what he could end up getting to be. I think if eventually Troy Terry becomes a 40 or 50 point player consistently, I think that's excellent, and I think that's more than what I would expect for him to be, long term. I think a lot of hype and unfair expectations have been placed on Troy Terry for what he could be, and I think that's why you've seen a bit of disappointment here on him only having 4 points in 21 games this year, on pace for only around 16 points at the end of the year. That's far below what I expected of him, but I think that's my expectations for him this year were 30 to 40 points, and I think some people expected him to hit 50 or 60. And I think that's where a lot of people differ on what Troy Terry could do this year and what he could do in his career. And I think that's why we've seen some split opinions on how bad Troy Terry's actually done this year. Yes, I'm disappointed in Troy Terry, but I'm not. If he had 4 more points at this point, I'd probably be singing a little bit different of a tune. 8 points in 21 games isn't great, but that would be right around where I placed him. He'd be on pace for about 32 points at the end of the season, which is kind of what I had. And I still think if he had 8 points right now, some people who are disappointed in him now would still be disappointed in him just as much, right? So I think those people would be happy if only happy if he had 14 or 15 points at this point and was close to leading the Ducks in scoring. So I think the expectations that some people place on him kind of dictate on how disappointed they are in his play this year.
What do you make of Brendan Gooley being paired with Corbinian and Holzer instead of Cam Fowler? I mean, because they've gotten caved the past couple of games. Like they've not been good 5-on-5. It's not been pretty for Holzer and Gooley.
I think it's injuries, especially. I think the fact that Hampus Lindholm is still out, you can't just throw Gooley and Fowler together and say, then we're going to throw Del Zotto and Goodbranson. And Larson was scratched last game. So did Mahura play last game?
Yes, he did.
So yeah, you can't just say Mahura and Goodbranson and Larson and or whoever and Holzer, or you can't just put those guys and have 2 really poor bottom pairings. That just, I think that would work out worse than it is now. And the Ducks have, as they have done in the past, have liked to spread those guys out across different pairings. We saw that when they had Boschman playing with Montour and Fowler playing with Bieksa, and then obviously Lindholm and Manson on the top. They don't like to just load up 1 or 2 pairings, and I think especially with the injuries to Manson and Lindholm, that kind of forces you to play Gooley and Fowler separate. I think one of Lindholm or Manson come back, or both of them. I think eventually we'll see Gooley back with Fowler, but right now you really can't, right? You just can't. You gotta, those are their 2 best defensemen right now. You've got to kind of split it up and at least have 2 somewhat decent pairings instead of 1 very good pairing and 2 awful pairings. I just think that's the way they have to approach it right now. As bad as it will look on the underlying stats, I think that's the way they have to go until Manson or Lindholm come back.
Yep, no, you're right. And last game it was Goodbranson and Mahura that just got smoked the entire night. It didn't look good at all. That's a tough look too. But I mean, when you're missing your top pair, we've talked about it many times over the past couple of weeks. It's going to be a tough go no matter what. Like you remove the top pair if you remove your top defenseman off of any lineup across the league, like how bad are these teams going to be? They're going to be terrible. It's going to be a real tough go.
No, you take your top 2 defensemen off any team right now, and it's a struggle for most teams. I think there are some who can overcome it. Nashville's one of those teams. As tough as it would be for them losing, Roman Josi and Ryan Ellis, they're a team that I think they have the depth they could overcome it, even without having PK Subban this year. But it would still be a loss, right? And not to say that Lindholm and Manson are on the same level as Josi and Ellis are. It's still a big loss losing your 2 best defensemen, no matter what team you are.
Brett says that he thought that Holsey played well last night. I don't know what game you were watching, man. I mean, just because he didn't get scored on doesn't mean he had a good game.
He looked good compared to how he's looked in other games, pretty much, I guess you could say.
So you weren't as shitty as you usually are. I guess that's how I would put it. Is there any questions in chat we need to get to? If you guys are in chat and you want to leave a question, go ahead. We have a few questions from Instagram. We'll get to that portion of the show now. But we'll see if those come in at first. We'll go to Instagram first. How about that?
Yeah. So a couple questions we had on Instagram. Garrett said, is it time to send Terry down to San Diego for a couple games? Seemed to help with Jones. Yeah, I would say yes, honestly. I think, again, if you send somebody down to San Diego at this point, you have to call somebody up. Ondrej Kase checks back in, and then I think you could maybe call up Kiefer Sherwood. He has 13 points in 14 games with San Diego. I think you call him up and send Terry down. I don't think that hurts or helps any team or it doesn't hurt them in a negative way, because the goals could replace Sherwood's production with Troy Terry, and the Ducks could give Kiefer Sherwood a shot. And while Troy Terry goes down there and builds up his confidence, I think that would be the best option for the Ducks and for San Diego right now, is to call up Kiefer Sherwood and at least throw him in, because he's a good guy you can throw into your bottom six. And then Troy Terry immediately gets to go down, replace Kiefer Sherwood, and play top 6 minutes in San Diego. I don't think it happens, but I think that would be best for Terry and for the Ducks at this point.
Yeah, I'm with you. I wouldn't mind seeing him go down and light it up a bit. Like you said, they've done it with Jones. They've done it with Comtois now. So why not? Why not see what he can do? But then again, I mean, I don't think it's going to happen either. I don't think they're not going to move him down there. They like him, and obviously he's still creating, just not getting the bounces. So I think he's going to have to give a little more time before we decide to do that. But Kiefer Sherwood, not as good of a player as Troy Terry in my eyes. I don't know if that would suffice Ducks management at all. So
I don't think he is either, but I think at this point, 4 points in 21 games, I think you might as well give somebody else a shot and send Troy Terry back down there to gain some confidence or whatever. It worked with him last year, and as Garrett pointed out, it helped with Jones this year so far. So I don't think it's the worst thing for the Ducks to do right now. Especially, Ondrej Kase comes back in, and you think of the top 6 wings that could easily be at this point Jones, Raquel, Silverberg, and Kase. And then you have Getzlaf and either Henrique or Steele up the middle, and then you throw in Nick Ritchie and Kiefer Sherwood as options on the third line. They're not hurting in the sense that sending Troy Terry down is gonna be detrimental to their offense. I think it could be good not only for Troy Terry to go down there, but it would be a good confidence boost for Kiefer Sherwood to reward his good play in San Diego with another shot to see what he can do in the NHL. Because when he was up there last year, pretty much all of us were happy with his play. He's not going to be a guy who's going to put up a ton of points, but he's a nice bottom 6 guy that can contribute offensively. So I think right now, if I had to pick 2 moves that San Diego could make, it's sending Troy Terry down and bringing up Kiefer Sherwood, and sending one of either Jakob Larsson or Josh Mahura down and bringing up Chris Weidman. I think those would be 2 good options for the Ducks to test those guys out and see how they can do.
No, I could go with that, especially on the defensive part. I would love to see another guy get a shot over Corbinian and Holzer, to be honest with you.
On the topic of defense, Gavin asks us, he says, how do you guys like the Goodbranson trade so far?
I still don't like it. If
it was a 1-year contract, if he was a rental for this year, I'd be like, whatever, because you gave up a 7th-round pick in Andreas Martinson. It's not like you gave up anything for him. It's probably still too much. A 7th-round pick is not as valuable as it is. It's still a draft piece for a guy who's not going to do too much. To be fair to Erik Goodbranson, I think we knew underlying numbers weren't going to be great, but he hasn't been that awful. When the points weren't going to be there. He's got 1 goal in 10 games for the Ducks. That's more than I expected.
Not why he was brought in.
No, but he's a +3. He's a +3 and only has 2 penalties, so it's not like he's taken a ton of penalties either. And I know plus minus is kind of a ridiculous stat, but he hasn't been on the negative end of goal scoring one on the ice. It's just, chances for something we knew shot attempts were going to be negative while Goodbranson was on the ice. That's been the case when he was with Pittsburgh and when he was with Florida as well and with Vancouver. So you knew that was going to be the case with Goodbranson. So as for, how do we like the trade? It's kind of, right around where I expected it to be, maybe a little bit better than I expected it to be, but that doesn't mean it's good at the same time.
What are his stats? He's played 10 games for the Ducks so far. 1 goal. Yeah, and did you look at his underlying numbers or no?
I have not.
Yeah, me either. I didn't go back and look at them. I mean, it is what it is. I'm not overly upset about it. I just don't think he's been great. They like him for his physical presence. That's why they brought him in. That's the whole reason why Nick Delorier is getting ice time too. You still got a little bit of old school mentality here in Anaheim, and you're going to see these types of guys. And like you said, Ed, $4 million is a lot. That's a lot of money for a guy who doesn't do anything positive on the offensive side of the puck.
So
that's how I feel about it.
So Goodbranson over 10 games with the Ducks, 45.2 Corsi for percentage. His career average is 47.5. The only stint he ever had where he was above 50% was his 3rd year in Florida, where he finished at 50.8. And the 19-game stint he had with Pittsburgh after getting traded over from Vancouver, he had a 54.7% over 19 games. So this is what you expect from Erik Gudbranson. Again, like when you look at mistakes defensively, he hasn't made a glaring amount where I'm like, wow, this is completely awful. So it's been what I expected, and like I said, maybe a little bit better than I expected, but by no means does that mean the trade has been good. I don't think it's ever going to be good. I don't think Erik Gudbranson's ever going to be good for Anaheim, but if he can just not be bad, that's better than nothing. I think the sticking point for me is always going to be he's on here for another year at $4 million, and you look at next year with Corey Perry's buyout going up to over $6 million. That's not going to put the Ducks in a tough cap crunch in the sense that they have to sign anybody, but if they wanted to go out and explore any trades or going to get some free agents, then you're stuck there with that extra $4 million that you probably didn't need, and you could have just called up Chris Weidman or Yanni Hakanpää and gave them a chance and probably got similar production out of those two than what you get with Gudbranson.
Well, yeah, we talked about it before. He's here, and he wasn't the first choice. They were trying to get Kevin Shattenkirk, trying to get Justin Falk. Didn't work out. Got Erik Gudbranson. It's not like Bob Murray and team didn't try to get a talented guy. I mean, you look at the year right now that Shattenkirk's having. I mean, granted, he's playing on a great, talented team in Tampa, which is where he obviously wanted to go there to try to win a cup. The Ducks are in that window right now, so that's probably why they didn't get him. But you also look at Gudbranson's playing on a team that's not being amazing either, right? Like it's not like he's playing on a team that's playing high-level hockey night in, night out. He's not the only bad guy on this squad.
No, for sure. He's not. Do we have any other questions in chat? I think that was it for Instagram. I think the only thing we have left is we just got to quickly look ahead at the Washington game, right?
Yeah, we can keep that brief. What do we got? They play tomorrow in Washington.
Washington's still the best team in the NHL. Yep, 34 points, 15, 3, and 4. And, of course, Ovechkin leading them in goals. He's got 14 goals on this year. We talked about John Carlson at the beginning of the year, I think, on one of our Patreon shows. Who was it? Paul Coffey said he could potentially score 100 points this year. Well, that's out of reach, I think. I mean, he has 32 and 22, so it's maybe not out of reach. I don't know. What would that put him on pace for? Around 95, 94 points right at this point?
What he's at right now?
He's at 32 in 22. So I think that would put him on pace for about like 93 or 4 points. So I don't think he's going to hit 100 points in a season by any means. But the Washington Capitals, despite not getting great goaltending, are one of the best teams, or I guess they are the best team in the league right now. And it's all.
So he's at 32 points. ESPN.com does projected based on what they've done. 8 goals, 24 assists. He's projected for 30 goals, 89 assists for 119 points if he keeps the pace.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so. But
kind of a
but
big
you never
ask.
know. And the thing I think with the Capitals this year is they're getting scoring not just from Ovechkin. So Kuznetsov has been great since coming back from the suspension. Backstrom has been himself. TJ Oshie's been pretty good. And then Tom Wilson and Jakub Vrana have been really good. And so their top 6 is very, very dangerous, and that's something the Ducks are going to have to go into. And then, again, getting points from the blue line and John Carlson is going to be a big task for the Ducks to handle. And this is a team who comes in 9th-ranked power play, 6th-ranked penalty kill, 3rd-ranked offense in the league. So if you're going to beat them, it almost seems like you're going to have to try and outgun them, which is going to be very difficult to do. It's a tough matchup. I think we said the Blues were going to be a very tough matchup, being the best team in the Western Conference so far this season, and now you go right from there after an impressive win against them, and you go and face the Capitals. I believe it's in Washington too, so you're going to play in Washington against the best team in the league. It's the toughest game of the season, I think, and it's a statement game, I think, for the Ducks going into this one, seeing how they can kind of hold pace against the best team in the league.
Yeah, and the Ducks, they've hemorrhaged the second most scoring chances against 5-on-5 this season. So, and the Capitals, I think, have had the second most chances for this season 5-on-5. So it's going to be very interesting what kind of tale we get to look at tomorrow when we talk on Wednesday's night show. So before we wrap this up, if you like hearing us, obviously if you're listening, you made it this far, you do, and you would like some more, stuff other than just Ducks talk, Eddie, Jason, and I also do a Patreon where we do 2 shows a month. Those are extra bonus shows that you would get. You head over to Forever Mighty, or it's patreon.com/puckguysforevermighty. And you can check out our tiers there. We have tons of stuff that we give back to you guys. We do a Pucks and Brews show, which we're doing next weekend. That's why there's no NHL news on this show today. We'll be covering all of that basically next weekend, where we drink beer with you guys. Obviously virtually. We'll be over Skype, where you guys can join us on YouTube Live. And then if you can't make it to the live show, that's fine. We always put it up and you can privately download it. We'll send you guys the link to listen to after. We also do a rant show where basically we all get fired up about something and go on some fun rants. Not always hockey related, not always Ducks related. So if you want more hockey news from us, check us out on Patreon. But Ed, win or loss tomorrow. We have a game on Wednesday. It's the only game between now and Wednesday. What are we looking at here for the Ducks?
What, are they going to win or are they going to lose?
Yeah, I'm gonna make you predict here.
Man, I never like saying the Ducks are gonna lose, but
Washington's been up and down too. They're the best.
They are 6-1-1 after. Yeah, the last 5 games. They're 6-1-1 in the month of November, but they do have 2 losses in their last 4. They lost in a shootout to Arizona and a 5-2 loss to Montreal. But they did beat Boston 3-2 in a shootout in their last game, which is a big win for them. So I think it's going to be a lot closer than some people would think. I think a lot of people are expecting the Ducks to get blown out in this game, but especially if John Gibson is playing, the Ducks are always in the game. And I think they have some momentum after snapping a 5-game losing streak and beating one of the best teams in the league. And for some reason against the Caps, they always seem to come out to play. And it always seems to be a barn burner of a game. It's never like a 2-1 game. It always ends up being like 5-4 or 6-5 or something. I think that was it the last time they played the Caps, was it the comeback or no?
Oh boy.
I think that might have been the last time they played the Caps, but there always seems to be that type of game. So I think ultimately that the Washington ends up winning this game, but I would not be surprised to see the Ducks make this a close game and potentially take it overtime.
I'm going to go ahead and say the Ducks get another road win out, and they sweep the Cup champs for the past 2 seasons, back-to-back wins. I'm going to go there on that one.
Boost if they do, because after that they've got Florida, Tampa, New York as their next 3 games after that, which I don't want to say it gets a little bit easier, because Tampa is still, as bad as they played this year, still a great team. But Florida started turning it on lately, and I think that's the Rangers, not the Islanders. But now I gotta check, because if that's the Islanders, then it's a tough stretch. Let's see.
Oh, it's Florida on Thursday. Ducks
no,
play
I
in
said
Florida.
Yeah, it's Florida. So the next 3 games after this are Florida, Tampa, and the Islanders. So it doesn't get any easier. So I think this is a nice momentum boost to go out and if you can beat the Caps, to give you some momentum on in this next stretch where you go down through Florida and you play Florida, the Panthers, who have kind of turned it on as of late, and Barkov has been unbelievable. Then you go play the team that was supposed to be the best team in the league and still has some lethal weapons in Stamkos, Kucherov, and Braden Point, and then to go to the Islanders and have to deal with Barry Trotz and how, the Islanders point percentage wise are the best team in the league this year. So it's a tough 4-game stretch here, and I think it all begins with how well they play against the Capitals.
Yeah, the Ducks beat Washington in February 5-2, and then in December of 2018 they beat them 6-5. Before that, they beat the Capitals 4-0. So they've been beating the Caps. So it's not a bad omen. So we'll see what happens there. We also have a watch party coming up next Saturday. Bombay just brought it up in chat. So thank you, Shane. Appreciate it to remind us. But we're going to be meeting at Lampless Pizza in West Yorba Linda. I almost forgot where it was going to be at. Game time is at 4 p.m. It'll be puck drop. Jason and I will be there around 3:30. Ed will be there in spirit unless he decides to fly down here. But he doesn't like to fly to California. He just doesn't like coming to California. He likes to freeze his ass.
If the Rangers finish higher than the Devils this year, I get a trip down there anyway. So
it might happen. Let's hope. We'll see how it goes. But we'll be posting stuff on all over social media to remind you guys about the watch party, what's going on at the watch party. I'm sure we'll have giveaways, and we'll have a good time. We hope to see you guys there. And I think that's it for the night. We'll talk to you guys on Wednesday.
See you guys.